He's 16. It's because he's a kid of this age. He is always doing this meta analysis of whatever he's watching.
That's our job on this show.
Well, then, what do you think happens? I guess when we grow up and have kids. I learned it from watching you, Dad. Uh,
Welcome back to Geek Channel 8. I'm Eric.
and I'm Will.
I read a book called Caleb Williams or Things as They Are by William Godwin, which was written during the period right after the French Revolution when there were a lot of new thinkers and questioning of the aristocracy, even by the aristocracy. These are the people that led to the founding of the United States, among other things. But one was this anarchist, William Godwin, who wrote this book about a guy who is just like mercilessly like has his life ruined by an aristocrat because he happens to know that the aristocrat murdered someone. It predates Charles Dickens, but it's very Dickensian, and like he's thrown into prison, and it's like this
Wow.
horrible dungeon. It's not even like prisons nowadays. It's like horrible, and every time he either escapes or gets released and tries to go start a life someplace else, the guy like comes after him again. It's very anti-authoritarian, even sort of anti-capitalist for its time. The guy was a suffragette. He was married to Mary Wollstonecraft. His daughter, who he insisted be educated as a man, was Mary Shelley, who wrote Frankenstein.
Oh.
So the guy is like extremely progressive for a time when just questioning the existence of a monarchy is a hangable offense, right?
Honestly, I don't feel like we get enough on the French anyway. Just like us, their democracy currently is not anywhere close to perfect. But to give credit where credit is due, when Lafayette was hanging with Washington, he was flat out questioning him and like, no, what's up with the slavery, man? We gotta get rid of that. No, no, that's not cool, man. No. Mm-mm. Of course, they have a lot of their letters, so they. At one point, Washington's like, "All right, fine, okay, your points are great, and I can't really argue with them. Well, if we let the slaves go, who's going to do all the work?" So,
Did you have you seen the Saturday Night Live sketches about that?
no, no. Oh my gosh,
Okay, wait. I'm gonna pause the recording so that I can send them to you. All right, hang on.
I
I had to pause to show you that because Saturday Night Live has actually been on a comeback in recent years, and that's one of the ones that stands out to me as like one of their better sketches.
it really did. It felt like a throwback to, like the ones they did where, so you got the Earl of Sandwich walking around
Yeah,
yeah,
and
like,
and douchebag.
yes.
Behind every great invention is a douchebag.
Oh, and I love that they have these the competing comedic ideas in there. And of course nobody knows. Um
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So right on topic. We were talking about this about the family about the ideas. We're going to actually spell things differently than the British on purpose to make sure that they know and everyone knows that we're different than them.
Well, and the British do it too, right? They're the only ones that drive on the left side of the road, besides places that were colonies of them, because
Oh yeah.
just to be different from the French, right? That was like the whole reason, supposedly, you know?
Well, it's astonishing when I think about how much of the English language just comes from the French anyway. Crazy. I mean, how often was, England basically run by French nobles anyway? So didn't that go
Well,
back?
it still is, right? Like the Norman conquests were okay, Norman, Norse, Vikings,
Yeah.
but they were Vikings that had settled in France, right? And then they crossed the channel and conquered, and the House of Windsor, the current monarchs, right? They're descendant from William the Conqueror, right?
Oh,
So you're talking about essentially they've been ruled by the French for all these centuries anyway. But no, no, no. Let's just ignore that.
well, now that makes me want to think that there's some holdouts who don't recognize. I don't recognize the monarchy. Oh, you're one of those modern sorts. No, no, this is not the monarchy. These are these newfangled newcomers. Yeah, no, I think there's probably some holdouts like that.
Oh, I'm sure there's like some Isle of Man or Isle of Wight or some isle somewhere that's like, yeah, no, we don't need like, well, Scotland, right? They've been trying to secede forever. I think
There.
right now we have listeners in the UK to this podcast that are screaming at the radio. Like, I'm sure we've got all of this wrong, but
Okay. So to be fair, I'm gleefully uh, exhibiting my ignorance. I mean, let's face it, I'm an old man now. I mean, if I was going to learn this stuff, it probably would have happened by now. But no, and it's all in good fun.
let's jump into a movie that is set in Mexico, but everybody speaks English. We'll get to that in a minute, but let me give a background to the year that this came out. Valley of Gwangi came out in 1969, in the middle of the year. So let's back up to 1968 just to have some perspective on what was going on in the world in the year leading up to its release. July 17th of 1968, Saddam Hussein became the vice chairman of the Revolutionary Council of Iraq in a coup d'etat.
Oh, yeah, our ally, Saddam Hussein. I remember now.
Yep. August 10th, Piedmont Airlines Flight 230 crashed just short of the runway on approach to Charleston, West Virginia, at the end of a flight from Cincinnati, Ohio, killing 35 of the 37 people aboard.
Wow.
September 23rd, the Tet Offensive comes to an end in South Vietnam. October 2nd, and we're going to mispronounce this like everything else on this show, the Tlatelolco Massacre, a student demonstration, ended in a massacre, a bloodbath in La Plaza de la Tres Culturas in Tlatelolco, Mexico City, Mexico. And this was just 10 days before the opening ceremonies of the 1968 Summer Olympics there.
Yeah, I believe it was. Wasn't this the famous protest for the I think they were sprinters, runners, where they held up their fists. And
And yeah, that's that. November 22nd, the Beatles' White Album comes out. And December 24th of 1968, the crew of the Apollo 8 enter orbit around the moon. January 20th of 1969, Richard Nixon is sworn in as the 37th president of the United States. February 8th, the Allende meteorite explodes over Mexico.
ooh,
March 31st, the Barrow Terran coal mine disaster kills 153 coal miners in Mexico. April 4th, Denton Cooley implants the first temporary artificial heart. And then in May of 1969, May 15th, American teenager Robert R. died in St. Louis, Missouri of a baffling medical condition. By 1984, it was finally identified as the earliest confirmed case of HIV/AIDS in North America.
wow.
June 11th of 1969, The Valley of Gwangi premieres in Detroit, but it will not get its wider release until September 3rd, 1969, when it opens in New York City. If you haven't heard of this movie, there's a good reason. It was really not released with a lot of fanfare. A lot of its target audience totally missed it. So let's talk a little bit about how this came about. This is a very old movie in concept. The story of Gwangi was originally thought up by Willis O'Brien, who was the guy who created the special effects for King Kong.
Ah, okay.
It was inspired by Arthur Conan Doyle's book, The Lost World, and added in some of the elements from King Kong, you know, capturing a creature, bringing it back, and it running amok, you know.
Yeah.
News of this project been dated back to June of 1941. In O'Brien's version, it was originally going to be called Valley of the Mists, and cowboys discover an Allosaurus in the Grand Canyon.
Huh.
And after finally roping it, they put it in a Wild West show. But the creature, which they call Gwangi, breaks free and fights some lions from the show that have also escaped. After killing the lions, it goes on a rampage and in the town and finally is run off of a cliff by a man in a truck.
Huh.
So Willis O'Brien worked on the project while he was at our RKO Pictures, the same studio that made King Kong, for most of 1942. But RKO canceled the production because they did research where they claimed that the public did not want to see a picture about dinosaurs.
Huh.
So I don't know what was wrong with people in 1940s that didn't want to see dinosaurs, but they're wrong. According to Ray Harryhausen, the project, quote, didn't get to the shooting stage. They built a series of dioramas in three-dimensional cardboard cutouts for each setup. I saw those and I saw a lot of O'Brien's drawings at the time, but that's as far as it got, unquote. In 1949, the journalist on the Hollywood beat, Hedda Hopper, reported that Jesse Lasky was going to Central America to film scenes for Valley of the Mists with O'Brien and a script by Richard Landau, but nothing ever came of that. Several years after O'Brien died, The Valley of Gwangi was released in 1969. It's worth noting that there was a similar film, The Beast of Hollow Mountain, that came out way back in 1956 by United Artists, produced by a Mexican film company that also used stop motion effects. And it was the only other feature film in the history of cinema to have the unusual story combination of cowboys and dinosaurs. In the late 1960s, Harryhausen and the producer Charles Schneer decided to do another movie together. They hadn't in several years, and they settled on The Valley of Gwangi. The Gwangi script rights were purchased from O'Brien's widow, and O'Brien's name was completely taken off of it. Whether intentionally or by oversight, we don't know. Schneer had the script rewritten by William Bast and offered it to Columbia, who had made his previous movies that he did with Ray Harryhausen, but the studio turned it down. And then Warner Brothers came along and agreed to finance it. So they signed James O'Connelly to direct it. Harryhausen said they decided to keep the story's early 20th century period to eliminate the, quote, cliches about the army moving in with tanks and missiles, unquote. Shear says the director, quote, lost interest in the middle of shooting. I don't think he enjoyed it. He just didn't have his heart in it when he was halfway through. According to Bast, quote, the director was monumentally stupid. Charlie opted for someone who matched his own insensitivity. O'Connell started tampering with the script as they were leaving. I thought, this is going to be a mess, unquote. But it's really not the directing or the writing or any of that that was the big problem with this. I think most people would agree it was the marketing. According to Harryhausen, quote, we got trapped in a change of management shuffle at Warner Brothers. If only they had publicized it properly. They just dumped the picture on the market. A lot of people who would have loved it never got a chance to see it, never knew it was playing.
Mm.
The new administration didn't give it the kind of release I expected, said Schneer. Quote, they didn't know how to market our type of picture as well as Columbia did. It was their money and their property, and they did what they wanted. I had no rapport with that new management. There was nothing I could do to change their mind, unquote.
It seems like this happens a lot, honestly.
Yeah.
It's amazing because I guess I had this image, this idea that earlier on films just got made so much faster, and there weren't like years and years of development hell. But I guess this one had did. I mean, it literally did have all that time to the point where the originator wasn't around to see it even get made. So
We also have to give the studio some credit for knowing what they were doing, because really this is right before we mentioned the Apollo orbiting the moon. They would eventually, like, one of the Apollo missions would land on the moon, right?
right.
So this was really toward the end of the atomic age, which began with the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki and started the wave in science fiction of the atomic horror subgenre of giant monsters. This was really, really the very end of that and the beginning of the space age, which would characterize science fiction for the next few decades. The management at Warner Brothers changed, and the film was released with very little promotion. It was on a double bill with a biker film, and it missed its target audience, was not as successful as other Harryhausen films, although it's become a cult classic since then. The New York Times called it generally a run-of-the-mill monster rally, but it did have an impact on films later. In fact, the scene where Gwangi suddenly appears from behind a hill and snatches the fleeing ornithomimus in its jaws was later copied by Spielberg in Jurassic Park.
Yeah. Okay. Copy that. Yeah.
Before we get too deep into that, let's talk about what to pair this with. What is the snack of choice for this film?
All right. For context, for because we haven't even started talking about the film, there is an actual Wild West show that is involved in the film. The characters belong to it. A lot of them do. I thought I'm going to look into snacks at a rodeo in particular, or a Wild West show. That honestly turned out to be kind of a dead end. But in looking at what the time period was, it was squarely like around 1900, because basically looking around when Buffalo Bill had his show.
Correct. The end of the 1800s, the start of the 20th century. Yeah.
Exactly. So that made me look into that a little more broadly, and it reminded me of a good episode of a good show on YouTube. Max Miller, Tasting History, and he does the classic pork and beans. Okay, so at the time period, to entice men to come in and to drink at their saloon owners would offer a free meal. You buy a drink, you get a free meal. And apparently it wasn't just total crap food, it was actually pretty good, depending. But the basic one was pork and beans. So, having actually made pork and beans myself from scratch, I'm not a big fan of anything that comes out of a can, pretty much. But the key here is, even though Max, I think, said you could use bacon, but for me, it's important to get something that's more like a smoked pork and use that. But he has great instructions. He always does. Really good, great show. And to pair with that, I noticed in particular there was one specific mentioned beverage that was suitable for all audiences, and it was a lemonade. Now, I'm not 100% on lemonade at the time period, but notably water wasn't always great. But that is actually part of what would help it. You have lemons, you make your lemonade, and you are introducing this really strong acid to your drink. So of course it's a treat. And one of the characters gets it as a treat. So because there's a young person in this. Anyway, blah blah blah. This is what my pairing would be. And you can put a side of biscuits, always good. But the key is sit down, have your cowboy beans, sip your lemonade, or skip that and go straight to the whiskey. But I think for this time period and the setting, that's what I would choose.
Stop and listen.
What you are about to see has never been seen before by human eyes.
Gwangi. Gwangi. The Valley of Gwangi. Amazing creatures. The beasts seen for the first time in the life of man. James Franciscus, Gila Golan, Richard Carlson, and Gwangi the Great. The world will never be the same again. The Valley of Gwangi. This picture has been rated G.
I think your reaction when I said we were going to watch Valley of Gwangi is, what the hell is that? So this was filmed in Dynamation. It opens in turn of the century Mexico, just south of the border from California somewhere. And there is a cowgirl named TJ. She basically owns a rodeo, but it is struggling to survive.
Yeah.
When her ex, Tuck Kirby, shows up, he's been working with Buffalo Bill's Wild West show as a stuntman. She's at first not interested in him, but there's a Mexican boy, Lope, who follows him around. He eventually saves Lope from a bull.
Yeah.
And then after that, she takes interest in him again.
Well, that's because he ran out on her. He left the show. He went off to go be a hustler. He's been buying and selling acts. He came back, but the reason why he came back was to buy her horse, who is that. This is actually pretty cool. Before the bull rescue, they show the horse and her doing a classic diving horse routine.
Yep.
Not the only thing, but one of many things where it's like, I'm like, wow, there's so many horse cowboy tricks in this movie. It's pretty cool, you know?
Yeah, it's a high dive act with a horse. He wants to buy the horse, but she doesn't want to sell it. She has another horse, though, that is the key to what's going to make the show a success. And she shows it to him. It is a tiny little horse. It is super tiny. It fits on top of a desktop or whatever, probably in the palm of your hand. They call it El Diablo.
One of her guys who also has a thing for her, one of the guys from the show, Carlos, I think, he got it, and he only got a hold of it because his brother retrieved it from the Forbidden Valley. Dun, 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 the Valley of Doom, and died in the process.
Yeah, in fact, we see in the very first scene him like struggling out of the desert with something in a bag. It's not revealed at that time what it is. It turns out it's this little horse. And there is a native Mexican woman who is like, they describe her as a gypsy. She's like a gypsy who foretells like nothing but doom if they do this.
Yeah. She's blind. She's a classic trope. This blind fortune teller. They have a patch on one of her eyes, and the other eye is sort of whited out and glazed over, which I thought was an interesting choice. But it's better than two patches, I suppose. You could just have a bandana. I don't know, whatever. But anyway, the point is, she is from the very beginning. This is doom. You will doom us all.
And of course, no one listens to her, like always in these things.
Yeah.
If you ever hear the warnings of like an old gypsy lady, you should listen to them because otherwise doom will happen.
So, they have the gypsy, which is, that's a term that has questionable usage, but that is what they used in the film. The Romney. Anyways, I think how they term themselves now. But in any case, that's what the choice was for the exotic natives, right? There's often an exotic native in films where they're like, oh, we have secret knowledge and we will tell you that, this is, you shouldn't do this. You're messing with things, man, should not. I was expecting something like that, but I thought it was going to be Native Americans. So that was an interesting choice.
My take on this is that she is in fact Native American or like Mayan or something like that.
Yeah, copy that.
But the white people just call her a gypsy. Like that's because that's the that's the closest analog
I
that
think that's fair, right? You're kind of spooky and stuff, yeah. Gypsy.
gypsy. It's just kind of a catch-all for that, right?
I mean, honestly, I think it's a thing that happens a lot. I mean, there's different groups I think, in America, and a lot of times people will be like, oh, yeah, they're the travelers. Oh, well, what are they? They're gypsies.
It's kind of like witch doctor. Any tribal like medicine man or whatever from any culture in the world that is not like a Western doctor, like that's a
Right,
witch doctor, right?
right. And well, for that matter, I mean, it's like, oh, okay, so you're not us. So you have a chief, right? No, we just got a king. No, no, we need to see your chief. So
Yeah.
I think that's a good take on that. It's like, oh yeah, no, it's not what we call ourselves. It's just what the white people call us. So anyway, fair enough.
So in the desert, they meet, and this is probably period accurate too. There's like the beginnings of paleontology happening, and there's like a paleontologist there because he's found like fossilized tiny little horse tracks. Then they realize that these tracks are similar to El Diablo's feet. So they follow them.
It's funny because there's like these series of betrayals, right? And this is kind of slow moving, to be honest. Lupe, that's the sidekick kid, and our main guy Tuck, they run into the professor. He tells them all about this Dawn horse and stuff, right? So when later on, when Tuck finds out about the little miniature horse, he's like, "Oh, professor, you gotta come see this," right?
Yep.
Well, nobody was supposed to know about any of this. This was supposed to be a super secret thing. So the professor sees it. He's like, "We gotta go to where did they get this thing?" Right? And then they're mad. Honestly, Carlos is mad, and so is she's mad because it's like you weren't supposed to tell anybody, and no one's going to tell them where it was. Where did you get it? It's a secret, right? Because he's excited because it's like a living fossil thing.
Right.
Ultimately, though, he's like, well, we'll go talk to the gypsies, and the gypsies won't tell them, right? The old lady tells him, it's doom on you. You're gonna die. It's bad. Leave it alone, Forbidden Valley. And he's like, oh well, okay. But if you won't tell me, maybe I could tell you where the horse is because you want to put it back, right?
Yeah.
So there's this manipulation. He lets the gypsies know where the horse is because he's gonna follow them, and this sets off the chain reaction because
Sure enough, they do steal it.
they steal it. He's standing by to follow them. He's hired Lupe because Lupe is a hustler. That kid, I'm telling you, he's like short round, but
Yeah.
wait. And anyway, so they chase after them. Tuck finds out this is happening. He goes to chase after them. When he shows up, Carlos is knocked out. He ends up blaming him for knocking him out, and they all jump on their horses. And so it's everybody, all the guys from the show, TJ and Tuck, the professors, they're all chasing after the gypsies with the horse.
Yeah. So you have all the cowboys basically riding to the Forbidden Valley.
Yeah.
All right. When they get there, the first thing that happens, first of all, the location's amazing looking. It was like they break through a canyon wall and ride through into this formerly sealed off hidden valley. And one of the first things that happens is a pteranodon swoops down and grabs Lope up into the air. For whatever reason, it comes crashing back down. They didn't actually shoot it, which is what I was expecting would happen.
Right.
Maybe because they thought we're scared they'd hit Lope. I don't know. But I guess Lope was too heavy for it. Whatever the case is, it crashes back down. And then this turns into a fight. Carlos kills it. There's a great mix here, by the way, for its time of practical puppet animation and the stop motion animation where it cuts between the two. Apparently, this pteranodon was described as a pterodactyl, which is a type of pterosaur, correctly. Apparently, the paleontology is correct here again.
Wow.
I was impressed with them getting it right with the little horse too.
Oh yeah, the Don horse.
The Eohippus.
Yeah.
Eohippus is what they're called.
Although ironically, they chase this horse into this valley, right? I think that's about the last we see of it.
Well, yeah, because they found something much cooler, which is they see an ornithomimus, which is a small dinosaur.
Yeah.
And they're like, what is that? And they go chasing after it to try to catch it for the show. And they just about catch it when out comes Gwangi, a T-Rex.
Yeah.
Apparently, originally it was conceived of as an Allosaurus. They went back and forth on Allosaurus and T-Rex, so it kind of has some aspects of both, but we're going to call it a T-Rex. This T-Rex comes in and eats the little ornithomimus. They all like, oh no, like they see it and they run away. It should be mentioned that we've had discussions about how nowadays there's this debate on whether or not a T-Rex is a predator or a scavenger.
Yeah.
This is clearly the predator T-Rex. But then after that, it finds the previously killed pterodactyl.
Right.
That's what distracts it from following them, and it picks it up and takes off with it. That's the scavenger T-Rex. So this one actually, the T-Rex is both in this.
I would describe, for instance, a bear as I'm like, oh, is a bear a predator? Yeah, they'll kill anything it could, little bear scavenge. Oh yeah, we're big on the bald eagles, right, in America, but from what I can tell, and this is ironic, but they can fish, hunt and whatever. But one of their favorite tactics is stealing food from other prey birds.
Yeah, I just saw on social media, a friend of mine in Alaska saw a bald eagle in the wild for the first time. And someone was like, what, your first visit to the dump? They escape to a place that they think is defensible.
Yeah.
But Gwangi shows up anyway. And to quote Ian Malcolm from the Jurassic Park series, their like high hiding spot is just a convenient biting height for Gwangi. This could have been the end of them, except a Styracosaurus shows up. And I'm like waiting for it and Gwangi to fight, like classic ceratopsian
Yes.
versus T-Rex fight, but it doesn't actually happen yet anyway.
There's a whole bunch of back and forth. Basically, they show off the wrangling. They're chasing the animals with torches, trying to ward them off. They've made spears. Oh, the reason why they actually have a good reason why the guns aren't working is because someone put in the blanks from the show instead of the actual, live ammunition, because they're showmen. They have guns, but mostly it's for the show.
Yes.
So that was kind of cool.
Yeah. It's sort of the reverse Alec Baldwin situation, right?
Yeah, I was thinking that. I wasn't sure if we should bring that up, but
yeah. So like somebody loads the wrong ammunition into the guns. Totally believable, actually. So their guns don't actually work, which was pretty cool. All I'd say is check and double check and triple check your ammunition. As we know from the Pete Postlethwaite character in The Lost World Jurassic Park, you never know when someone swapped your ammo with useless ammo.
There's always something.
Yeah.
Oh, and you know what? There's a lot of kids too, huh?
There's got to be a kid, They eventually rope and capture Gwangi and put him on a cart. So this is one of the only real plot holes here, in my opinion. One of the only big ones is that, like, where did they get this cart from? And they have time to make this cart, but I figure maybe they had stuff like that to transport cattle around and someone went and got it or something. I have no idea.
Yeah,
They put him on this cart and they wheel him back to be in the show.
And on the way, who shows up?
A dwarf.
Yeah, well, okay, so this is one of those themes where it's like, we want something to be creepy and weird. Okay, so with the blind gypsy, she shows up along with a dwarf, and they say, you're dooming us all. And they're like, yeah, whatever, lady. But of course, it's, foreshadowing.
So, long story short, they premiere the show, and of course, Gwangi breaks out because this dwarf tries to
Freedom. Yeah.
free him, opens, like, starts to dismantle the cage. The dwarf ends up getting eaten right as the curtain lifts on this thing, and then it breaks out and everybody panics. They run to seek shelter in a church.
Yeah.
I think it's Catholic cathedral. Looks very much like Notre Dame. Guanji eventually gets inside there.
With his butt. He wasn't even looking at him. He just used his tail.
Eventually, Tuck uses a long spear that a flag was hanging on to spear him. This is a case where clearly they had to have had a real spear with a flag on it in real life for the actor to hold,
Yeah.
and a model one, and they match perfectly.
Yeah.
I could not tell where the cut was made there.
Yeah. They used like the organ as it's like a distraction. It's crazy. He purposely traps the dinosaur in there with him, so he can't rampage anymore.
And then sets it on fire. Cathedral eventually burns down. Everybody is outside watching it burn to the ground. And that is the end of Gwangi. And that is the end of the Valley of Gwangi. So, reactions. I want to start with what you thought you were getting into and what you ended up getting out of this.
I wasn't set on time period of when this was made when I started it. So I was expecting something like, I don't know, akin to Anaconda. Well, that's what I was expecting. Let's put it this way. I was expecting something more 80s cheese. I didn't realize when it was made at first. So once I realized when it was made, I was like, okay, this is different. Totally different from, what the production would look like, etc. Once I got into it, I was like, oh, okay, so this is like Wild West show, etc. That was kind of cool. The setup I thought was really cool. The horse thing, I thought that was great. I mean, it's like, what a great tie-in. Instead of it being dinosaurs, I think I would have really liked like megafauna or something. That would have been more fun for me. It would have been something that maybe the Cowboys could have dealt with in a different way.
This is one of my all-time favorite dinosaur films. It was probably my favorite dinosaur film until the Jurassic Park films came out.
Huh.
I think it's criminally underrated. We did get some good monster battles. We got a T-Rex versus Styracosaurus.
Yeah.
We got a T-Rex versus an elephant.
Yes, I forgot it was in the arena. Yeah.
Yeah.
Elephant was like, screw you, man. I'll come for you.
And then it's not a comedy, but there were definitely comedic moments in there. One of my favorites is when they're revealing Gwangi for the first time. It's like eating the dwarf, and everybody's all horrified. And the band's playing this like peppy music. Like he tells the band to play music, to like to cover the screams and everything like that. And they start playing this like upbeat, happy music while like this dwarf is getting eaten by Gwangi.
I think the stuff that was almost entirely Western was probably my favorite parts. I think the, when I was younger, especially when we would have seen this first live, we could have been 9 or something and and I don't know when you first saw it and seen this, and it wasn't even been that old. Maybe, that would have been like 10 years old at that point. But yeah, I would have loved the dinosaurs and cowboy scenes. It's very inspirational. I'm like, oh, I love this plot. This is really cool. I want to see this. But maybe it's just because of saturation, because we've watched so many dinosaur movies lately. But I'm like, I like pretty much the entire plot. I'm good with acting, etc. I like all the set pieces, all the action sequences, but I find myself looking at them like this is like a storyboard for another movie. What I'm getting out of that is I'm like, I love everything about the ideas that are in this. And then the execution, I think I mentioned before, I really like Lupe. He's this kid who's, he's an orphan out there hustling. He's got all these businesses. He offers, he helps. He's like, for a price. He is like a prototype for somebody, like a character like Short Round from the Indiana Jones movies. Okay, just got to point out here, the Royal Society is always getting their business up, and it's like they think they own dinosaurs, man. They're always all like, what dinosaur? Where is that?
Yeah.
Where's an extinct animal? Oh, that's ours. Now, given the reputation the British have of collecting other people's artifacts, I think this is actually very fitting.
Yeah.
Of course, I'm laughing in American because we got plenty of loot of our own. We just got to it late.
Oh, no. Like, no. Cultural artifacts, Britain, you can have those. If there's oil there, it's ours. Like, that's like,
yeah, yes. Yeah.
if there's no oil there, we don't give a damn about it. Back to Valley of Gwangi.
Oh, hey, how about that?
Ultimately, I give this movie a thumbs up. I know it's a little bit slow at parts, and I know it is, pardon the pun, a one-trick pony in some cases, but it's a pretty good trick. So I give this movie a thumbs up. I've already said it's one of my favorite dinosaur films, which is why we ended up watching it. What do you think?
This is kind of on the intellectual end for me. It's like there's so much good stuff here that I have to give it a thumbs up. But it felt like homework, so there's that. But it was good homework. I'm like, I really learned something.
I imagine you couldn't get Becca and the kids to watch this.
Oh no, Becca totally watched it with me, and she had like words to say, most of which were around like, why aren't they doing this? And also like, Eric, what are you doing? What are you doing, Charity? You did it again. This is it.
She's not supposed to watch I am not to blame. I've said this before. Like Nat's wife, Tracy, always used to complain about this too. And it's like, I am not making you watch this. I am making your husband watch this. Like, if you choose to watch it, that's on you. Like,
yeah.
All right. I'm going to let you guys know that we are definitely slowing down our output because we are, I just have too many things going on. We used to come out 3 times a month. Right now, I'm going to try to make sure that we get at least 1 episode out each month, but I don't know that we're going to see an increase in that anytime soon. So please bear with us. You're not missing episodes. Nothing is like you didn't miss something if something doesn't come out on the 8th, 18th, and 28th of every month. All I'll say is one of those dates each month, we will come out with an episode for the foreseeable future. If you really would like to see us do more, support the show. Like, rate and review us, give us a good star rating, subscribe, whatever your platform's version of that is, do that. Tell people about the show. If we get enough people that listen to the show, maybe we can find a way to eventually do a Patreon or do something that can help us offset the costs of making it, and then we could probably bring it to you more often. But as of right now, looks like we're going down to about once a month. If you have opinions about this, write to us at GC8 podcast. That's letter G, letter C, number 8 podcast at gmail.com. Or come join the discussion on Facebook. We have a Facebook page and a Facebook group. Find them. You have to apply to join. It's not like automatic because Facebook sucks. So, but we'll approve you. Yeah. Any last words, Will?
I think this might have been the original purple dinosaur.
Okay. Until next time, this is Eric.
And this is Will.
Signing off.
I showed him Popeye. He said, and this little kid, he's like, so wait, all they do is fight? I'm like, creatively? He was not convinced.